Good evening. This week's Parsha, Parshas Pekudei, tells the story of how Moshe Rabbeinu presented a detailed cheshbon, a detailed calculation of what has been done with all of the contributions that the Jewish people gave for the building of the Mishkan, for the construction of the tabernacle in the desert. Where did these materials go to? What were they used for? Specifying in great and specific detail what the gold was used for, the silver was used for, and the copper was used for. Moshe Rabbeinu makes a cheshbon. How much gold there was, how much silver there was, how much copper there was, and what it went for. So, for example, when he talks about the silver, he says that altogether there were silver in the weight of 100 kikar, an enormous amount of silver, plus 1,775 shkalim. So you had 100 kikar of silver plus 1,775 shkalim. How did they get so much silver? So he says, the pasuk says, each Jew gave a machzis shekel, every Jew gave a half a shekel. And how many Jews gave a half a shekel? So you had 600,000 and 3,550. 603,550. So together that makes up 100 kikar plus the remainder. So he says the 100 kikar of silver they used to build the sockets that the pillars of the Mishkan were inside. And then the pasuk continues. Ves ha'elef u'shva ha'meyos v'chamisha v'shivim asav vavim la'amudim. Which means that the 1,775 shkalim that were left over, because you had 603,000 and 550 Jews giving shkalim. So you had left over 1,775 shkalim. With that, asa vavim la'amudim. He made hooks for the pillars. The pillars had hooks on them, vavim. These vavim were made of this silver. Now this pasuk created a very interesting and insightful commentary. The question that seemed to be perturbing the commentators on this pasuk was twofold. Number one, ve'es ha'elef ushva ha'meyos, with the hey hayidiyah. It should have said, and the 1,775 shkalim that were left over, with them he made hooks for the pillars. But he says with the 1,000 and the 700. The pasuk before, for example, says vayihi ma'as kikar kasef. We don't have vayihi hama'as or hakikar, the 100. Whenever we have a hey as a prefix to a word in Lashon Kodesh, it's known as the hey hayidiyah, the well-known one, the famous one, the popular one, the one that everybody is discussing. Ve'es ha'elef ushma ha'meyos, those famous 1,775 shkalim. What was so famous about them? They are the remainder of the previous shkalim that went into the count of 100 kikar. In addition to that, we're perturbed by the vs. The pasuk begins, and the vs, which is a continuation to before. Before in the pasuk we have vayihi ma'as hakik vayihi ma'as kikar akasef lotzekes asadnei hakodesh. The 100 kikar were used for the sockets. Ve'es adnei haparoiches, and for the sockets under the pareiches, under the curtain. And now we have of a new ve'es. Ve'es ha'elef v'shva ha'meyes v'chamisha v'shivim asavavim la'amudim. Because of these two interesting grammatical observations, we have an insight in the Medrash, a tradition in the Medrash that gives a new perspective on this pasuk. But before we quote the Medrash, let us also make note of the melody. When we read the Torah every Shabbos, we of course read it with the timing, with the trop, with the melody that each word has. On the Ha'elef, we have an unusual melody, an unusual tune. It's called Azla Gerish. V'es Ha'elef, which is an unusual tune in reading the Torah. Azla Gerish is not a very common note, but it's this note placed on the word Ha'elef. Why? And the 1,000 Ves Ha'elef and 775, he made with them hooks for the pillars. So Medrash Rabbah, Parshas Pekudei, the Medrash tells us that something happened. Moshe Rabbeinu was giving account of the material for the Mishkan. And he went through the list, and he began with the silver, the 100 kikar of silver, again an enormous weight, and he told the Jews what happened with them. And then he forgot what he has done with the 1,775 remainder shkalim of silver. The 600,000 shkalim were already accounted for in the original 100 kikar, because 100 kikar is 600,000 shkalim. But as we said a moment ago, in addition to that, there were more shkalim, because you didn't only have 600,000 Jews, you had an extra 3,550 Jews. Altogether 603,550. Each of them gave a half a shekel, so it's 3,550 people giving a half a shekel. That makes 1,775 complete shkalim. So he has a weight of silver in the amount of 1,775 shkalim of silver. A shekel is a coin that amounts to a particular weight of silver. And he forgets what he did with them. What were they used for? Shachach, he forgot. That's what the Medrash says. This explains the Ves Ha'elef, U'shva Ha'meyos. Because immediately the question was going around, what happened to them? They suddenly became very famous. They became very popular. What happened to them? Who pocketed them? Did somebody pocket them? What is Moshe Rabbeinu doing with the money? The 600,000 shkalim he accounted for. But the extras, 1775, what happened? They became ha'elef. It wasn't just, and another 1,775 he made hooks. The 1,000, the 775 that everyone was discussing because he forgot. What happened? And that's also the VS. This was a whole new subject. But Moshe forgot. Zak the Medrash, what happened? Heyir HaKadosh Baruch Hu Einov. Hashem opened up Moshe Rabbeinu's eyes, and he saw the image of a vav, which means in Hebrew a hook, which has the image of a vav, which had the image of a vav. He reminded himself, Asa vavim la'amudim. With this he made vavim, hooks, for the pillars. And he immediately told the Jews, the 1775 shkalim of silver, that weight of silver was used to build hooks for the pillars of the Mishkan. The pillars needed hooks from which they can hang the veils and the curtains to cover up the doors and the entrances of the Mishkan in the east and in the west. Part of the east and part of the west. Perhaps we may add, this explains beautifully the trop, the note. This wasn't just a smooth statement. There was a question. What happened? What happened to the money? What happened to those 1,775 shkalim? There was a question being raised. There was suspicion that could begin to circulate. You can hear it in the tune. And Moshe had the vision where he saw the Vavim and he understood this was the answer. He used it for Vavim for the Amudim. And the Medrash says, at that moment, the Jews were embraced, they were appeased, they were completely satisfied with the labor of the Mishkan, realizing that there was not a single shekel, not a penny that was squandered, that was used for any other purpose besides the building of the divine home. So now we understand the Hey Ves HaElef, and we also understand the Vav Ves HaElef. But the question now is, what happened? Suddenly that Moshe Rabbeinu forgot. Moshe Rabbeinu had a good mind. He had a keen mind. He had a memory to memorize all of the Torah and all of its intricate laws, 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain. And he couldn't remember what the silver was used for. Why was it with these particular shkalim that Moshe Rabbeinu lost focus of what happened to them, and he needed a special image that Hashem should light up his eyes and he should suddenly see that flying or floating Vav in front of him, to be able to recall and recount what transpired with the remainder 1775 shkalim of silver. So this evening I want to present to you two mystical answers, two homiletical responses to this, two explanations. One based on a maimer, on a discourse of the Alter Rebbe, and the other based on an explanation of the Chassam Sofer, Teiras Moshe, in his commentary on Parshas Pekudei. The Alter Rebbe has a maimer in Maimori Admor Azokin al Parshiyis HaTorah Moyadim, the discourses of the Alter Rebbe on the Parshiyis in Pekudei. He has a discourse that begins with the words Ves ha'elef u'shvameyes v'chamisha v'shivim asavavim la'amudim. And Alter Rebbe quotes the fact that the note on the word ha'elef is Azla Geirish, which we discussed a moment ago. And he quotes from the Zohar, the Tikkun Zohar says, Azla Geirish must be translated literally. Azla is the Aramaic word for going. Geirish means expulsion, girush, to expel, to drive out, to chase away. So Azla Geirish is when it goes and gets expelled, Kad Azla Shchinta Begalusa. It's when the Shechina gets expelled, it goes away from its natural domain and is expelled into exile. Representing the Jewish people as well, who together with the Shechina leave their natural habitat, their home, and they're sent away into exile. That is Azla Geirish. This, the Alter Rebbe says, can explain to us why Es HaElef is Azla Geirish, describing the years and the duration of Galus, of Azla Geirish, until the Geula, the redemption that will come b'meira b'yameinu speedily in our days. And here the Alter Rebbe, in a quite uncharacteristic maimer, we must say, begins discussing the history of civilization and the history of the Jewish people from a mystical, Kabbalistic, Hasidic perspective. When was the second Beis Hamikdash destroyed? Following which began a long exile, a long galus that continues to this very day. The second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, according to most opinions, by the Romans in the Hebrew year, in the Hebrew calendar, in the year Gimel Alafim, Tov Chav Ches, which is 3,828 years since creation. 3828 since the creation of the world. Today we are in Hey Alafim Tavshin Samach Ches 5,768. The destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash is in the year 3,828. In other words, in the midst of the fourth millennium since creation, closer to the end of the fourth millennium, to be exact, there are 172 years left to the conclusion of the fourth millennium. Because Gimel Tav Chav Ches 3828 gives us 172 years until we hit the year 4000. The fourth millennium has been completed and we are beginning the fifth millennium. So it's 172 years before the conclusion of the fourth millennium. Just parenthetically, in the English calendar, that would be the year 68 after the Common Era. Of course, the secular calendar begins very close to the time when the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The time when the official founder of Christianity was born, or approximately that time, that's the year 0. And 68 years after that, the Romans, who killed him, destroyed the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. I should say there are some opinions that the Churban was 2 years later, the year 7, which would be 3,830. But I think it's Rashi and Masechta Avodah Zarah, Daf Tes, and many other sources that believe that it was in the year 68 after the Common Era, 3828. So there's 172 years left. And the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain how the sixth millennium and the 7 millennia of history, 7 millennia of history correspond to the 7 midos: Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. The first millennium, the first 1,000 years, embodied the energy of chesed, of grace, of love, which is the reason that people lived for so long. The second millennium embodied the energy of gevura, discipline, sternness, strictness, quid pro quo. It's not blind love, it demands reciprocity. You live up to your potential and expectations must be met, and if not, there are consequences. Hence, the second millennium saw the flood, the Mabul, which destroyed civilization and humanity, being that humanity was totally not responding to its calling, to its moral and spiritual calling. The third millennium saw the exodus of Egypt and the giving of the Torah. That's the millennium that embodied the energy of Tiferes, of compassion, of synthesis, of integration. Compassion. Recognizing the flaws of the recipient and yet giving to the recipient. Engaging in a deep relationship we know as Rachamim or Tiferes, as beauty. It's not the blind love that ignores the reality of the recipient. It's not the stern discipline that demands excellence, and if not, there is a detachment. Rather, it is the attribute that recognizes flaws, recognizes misgivings, and yet chooses to have mercy. Empathizes. There is empathy, there is compassion. This is the third millennium in which Torah was given to the world. A blueprint for humanity, This happens in the year 2448 since creation. That's when the Jews left Egypt and received the Torah on Shavuos. That's the third millennium. The fourth millennium is Netzach. It embodies the energy of victory. And it's the millennium when both Beitei Mikdash stood, the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash. We're in the fourth millennium of Netzach. But the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed in the fourth millennium, but only at its end, only 172 years before its conclusion. Because, as the Alter Rebbe puts it, Kabbalistically, Netzach and Hod represent the two thighs of the body. Chesed is the right arm, Gvura, the left arm, Teferah is the torso. Netzach, the right thigh and leg, and Hod, the left one. And at the end of Netzach, at the end of the structure of Netzach, there is room for loss and for distortion and for perversion. And that is why towards the end of the fourth millennium, at the heel of the fourth millennium, at the Akev is the same letters like Kuf Ayin Beis, 172. So at the Akev of the fourth millennium, we have the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. The fifth millennium, which is a millennium complete with Galus, completely, Jews experienced persecution and alienation, embodies the fifth midah, which is Hod, which is very much connected to Gvura, very much connected to the second millennium. They're on the left column. Kol hayoim dava, Yirmiyah says in Eicha. The whole day sadness. Dava is the same letters like Hod. Really what Hod represents is surrender and also a very deep and inner consistency, a stubbornness, a commitment that is very, very deep. And that is what emerged in the fifth millennium. The sixth millennium, our millennium, embodies the sixth midah, which is Yesod, which is actually bonding, communication, intimacy, which is a preparation for the seventh millennium, Malchus, royalty, femininity, Shabbat, Shabbos, the millennium of the Geula, of the redemption. So the Alter Rebbe, in this Maimer, gives a ketz. You know, Gdolei Yisrael, great Jews throughout the generations, would designate particular years as years that are uniquely auspicious and suitable for Mashiach to come that year. And in this Maimer, the Alter Rebbe posits that it's the year Tov Reish Gimel. Tov Reish Gimel would be 5,603. In the English calendar, it would be 1843. What's the cheshbon? The destruction of the Beis HaMikdash was in the year 3828, or 68 after the Common Era, 172 years before the conclusion of the fourth millennium. So take 172 years, then take the entire fifth millennium, so you have 1,000 plus 172, and then take 603 from the sixth millennium, and what's the number? Ves ha'elef, v'shiva meyes, v'chamisha v'chamishim. That's 1,775. 1775. In other words, from Churban by Yisrael till Tov Reish Gimel is 1,775 years. So ves ha'elef, v'shva meyes, v'chamisha v'shivim, 1,775. These are the years of exile. Afsa Babim La'amudim, when he made hooks for the pillars. This is the time of Galus, when the Jews are stuck and submerged in exile as a preparation to the redemption. Which is why the trop, the melodies Azla Geirish, Vesa Elef, representing the years of expulsion, the years of exile. Which I think also explains the note. The Jew asks a question. Why? What is the need for 1,775 years of Galus? What is going on here? What is the need for it? Why so many years in exile? The first exile was 70 years. Now it's 1775 years, according to the Alter Rebbe's calculation. He asks why. Moshe Rabbeinu asks why. That's the deeper meaning in the Medrash. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't understand what's the secret behind. What is the explanation to the enigma, to the mystery behind the 1,775 years? And the answer for that, Hashem has to light up the face of Moshe, is asa vavim la'amudim. And as the Alter Rebbe explains it Kabbalistically, the amudim, the pillars, represent netzach and hoid, like in the human body. The two pillars, the two thighs and legs, yachin and bayis, in the Beis HaMikdash, the Shlomo Melech built. These are the two pillars, the two attributes of netzach and hoid. Netzach is victory. It's the extroverted capacity of a person to fight for something and prevail. And hoid is the inner commitment and dedication, which is introverted. It's the stubbornness. It's the commitment from within, the creativity from within, not projected outwardly, but rather creating a tenaciousness. The human being perseveres inwardly through thick and thin, which is why the Fourth Millennium was Netzach and the Fifth Millennium was hoid. These are the two pillars. Now, in Kabbalistic and Hasidic terminology, there are the 10 faculties of the soul. The first 3 are cognitive. Chachma, Bina, Das, conception, comprehension, application. Then you have the emotional experiences, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, which is love, discipline or strength, and empathy, compassion, which is really the synthesis between two people. Because in love, I am blind to your reality. In strength, I am in tune with your reality, but totally from my perspective. And in empathy, there is the synthesis, which is why the Third Millennium, Matan Torah, the synthesis between God and humanity, heaven and earth, happens in the Third Millennium. So these are the 3 emotions, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. And then we have the functional faculties, which is Netzach, victory, getting things done, actualization, and hoid, which also gets things done in a different way, and yisoid, which is the bonding with an experience. So Netzach and hoid represent the 2 pillars that begin to actualize things. Just like the 2 legs, which get you places. You may have a lot in your mind, and you may feel a lot in your heart, but the 2 legs are needed to get it out there. What Hasidus calls actualization. Bring it down. Vav is the letter in the alphabet which Kabbalistically represents Hamshacha Molmaila Lamata, communicating something from a higher level to a lower level, like the shape of the Vav. The Langenun goes even lower, but it goes too low. The Vav keeps it focused. It's the concept of Hamshacha, of bringing it down. So Asa Vavim La'amudim represents making a Vav, bringing down, revealing the Amudim, the energies of Netzach and Hoid of the world of Atzilus, which bring down the higher levels of godliness. So this is the answer, that the whole purpose and objective of Golus is not because Golus itself is positive. It's not because exile itself is the objective. Exile is the preparation, it's the prerequisite for Geula, for redemption. The explosion of godliness, the Vavim La'amudim that occurs in the time of Mashiach, is possible only as a result of the introduction and the work and the refinement that occurs throughout Golus. So, the 1,775, what is its purpose? It's Asa Vavim La'amudim Sheyiyez Galus Alakus Al Yidei Ha'amudim Sheim Nehida Atzilis Shemeiros Begilui Rav B'Neshamas Yisrael Asid Lavi V'Biyas HaMashiach V'Meira B'Yameinu V'Dai L'Meiv. It is all in order that there should be the Vavim La'amudim, that as a result of the Golus, the Jewish people and the world will reach the climax of Geula, the climax of Mashiach, which will be such a revelation of godliness that we in the Golus paradigm don't even understand what type of revelation it is. That justifies the tremendous anguish of Golos. This is the Maimer. This is the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe. Unfortunately, 1843 passed. Tafresh Gimel passed. Mashiach didn't come. A ketz it was, as the Alter Rebbe says, but Mashiach didn't come. Yes, there was a tremendous explosion of Pnimiyus HaTorah, of the soul of Torah that year and those years. But Mashiach in actuality never came that year. There's a similar story that occurred a few years later. There was another ketz for Tafresh Ches, 1848. And at the end of the year, the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, came to his father, the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek, and said, Tata, what happened to the ketz of Tafresh Ches? The Tzemach Tzedek said, so it's abgedruckte Lekutei Torah. The volume Lekutei Torah of the Alter Rebbe, his drushim, his discourses on the Parshiyos, Vayikra Bamidbar Dvarim Shir Hashirim, was printed Tafresh Ches. The revelations of Lekutei Torah, that happened Tafresh Ches. So the Rebbe Maharash told him, Medaf Haba Mashiach and Bepashtus, we need Mashiach literally. Or as the Gemara put it in Sanhedrin, Kalu kala kitzin, all the kitzin are finished already. Ve'eina davar tali ala b'tshuva. And this the Gemara said then, 1700 years ago. Now, after years after Tafresh Gimel, it's not 1843, it's 2008. Certainly after the endless darkness and horrific pain and savage suffering the Jewish people and the world experienced, the bloodiest century that followed Tafresh Gimel, the next 100 years until today, most certainly, are ready beyond ready for the greatest revelations of the Mashiach and the Giyulah. But there's one more explanation, briefly, of the Chassam Sofer that I want to share with you, and base it on what the Chassam Sofer says in this week's parsha. He says what went on here with the 1775 shkalim was a very spiritual and loaded experience. Namely, we know that there are 600,000 Jewish generic souls corresponding to the 600,000 letters of Torah. The word Yisrael is an acronym. Yesh Shishim Ribu Yosis Torah. There are 600,000 letters in Torah. Because every Jewish generic soul is rooted, it's originated in a letter of Torah. When you open up a Torah, you have the souls of Israel. They are organically connected with Torah. Every soul has its letter. So you had the 600,000 souls that gave the 600,000 half a shkalim. And Moshe Rabbeinu knew exactly what happened with them. But then there were the 3,000 Jews. The additional 3,550 Jews who gave shkalim. Who gave half a shkalim. And Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what happened to them. Zok the Chassam Sofer, what happened? You have the Jews that they have their letter in the Torah. 600,000 letters in Torah. 600,000 Jews. So their connection to Torah is obvious, it's manifested, it's conspicuous. Moshe Rabbeinu represents Torah. He looks at these Jewish souls and he sees their organic connection and relationship with Torah. He looks at Torah and he sees these souls. Their Jewishness is obvious and it's manifested. But then there came the shkalim of the additional Jews, in addition to 600,000. Whose relationship to Torah is not evident, whose relationship to Torah is not manifested, it's inconspicuous, it's concealed, and Moshe Rabbeinu did not know what happened with them, which means Moshe Rabbeinu, who personifies Torah, could not fathom and see clearly their relationship with Torah. There's no letter for them. They're not connected. Moshe Rabbeinu was at loss. What is the nature of these souls? Are these souls also part of the covenant? Are these souls also part of that intrinsic, indispensable, eternal relationship between the Shamas Yisrael, between the soul of Israel and God Almighty, the Rebbeinu Shalom? Moshe was at loss because he looks at these souls and they don't have a source in Torah. He doesn't see their letters in Torah. He forgets. The fact that he didn't know what happened with these shkalim for the Mishkan is a manifestation of a much deeper existential question. What is the relationship of these Jews with God? What is the relationship of these Jews with God's home? What is the relationship of these Jews with Torah? And for this, Moshe had to get a special from Hashem. Heir HaKadosh Baruch Hu es ein of Hashem opened up Moshe Rabbeinu's eyes, and he realized that these souls too were not just valuable, they were indispensable to Hashem's home. Asavavim la'amudim. They were hooks on the pillars. There are the pillars of Israel. The Gemara discusses in Yuma the tzaddik yisoid olam. The tzaddikim who are the foundations of the world. They're the pillars. Amudei olam, the foundations of the world. But these souls are vavim la'amudim. They are hooks that are connected, intrinsically connected. These are hooks that could connect themselves with these amudim. And hence they are very connected to the Mishkan. And this is what he brings, the Gemara brings in Ksuvas. The Alter Rebbe quotes it actually in Tanya in the second chapter. Our Rabbi said, when a Jew cleaves to a Talmid Chacham, even if the Jew himself is not, it's as though he's mamish connected to the Shechina. And every single Jew could connect to the Talmid Chacham, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that the Talmidei Chachamim represent the Jews, in whom the godly soul is manifested and revealed in its full intensity and its full luminescence and glory. And when the Jew connects to this type of Yid, who's filled with godliness, who's filled with spirituality, who's filled with Torah, who's filled with Kedusha, he or she discovers their own soul, their own relationship. Asavavim la'amudim, they too could become hooks that connect to the amudei olam, to the tzaddik yisoid olam, in which every person has a connection. And the Chassam Sofer brings the interesting Gemara in Masechta Ksuvas. The Gemara in Masechta Ksuvas, Daf Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, brings the opinion of Rabbi Lezer, that the ignoramuses, those who are detached from Torah, will not live in the future during the resurrection. Rabbi Yochanan was very upset. This is inappropriate. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. But Rabbi Lezer proves it from a pasuk. And when Rabbi Lezer saw that Rabbi Yochanan is in pain, he told him, Rebbe, matzasi lehen takana. I found a way to remedy the situation. V'atem adveikim b'Hashem elekechem chayim kulchem hayoim. Cleave to Hashem and you're alive. How could you cleave to Hashem? How could you cleave to the Shechina? Pshat is, kala meisi bitel Talmid Chacham. If you marry your daughter off to a Talmid Chacham. Ha'isha prakmati l'Talmidei Chachamim. You help financially Talmidei Chachamim. Hamahana Talmidei Chachamim in a chasav. You give a Talmid Chacham from your property. Ma'ila lavakasav kilu medabik b'Shechina. The Torah considers as though you're connected to the Shechina. And this is the source of what the Alter Rebbe explains in the second chapter of Tanya. That in each generation there are the Roshei Alpha Yisrael, there are the spiritual leaders of the Jewish people. The souls who are deeply connected with the souls of all the Jewish people. Souls that manifest in a very revealed way a relationship with Hashem. And when a Jew connects to such a Talmid Chacham, when a Jew comes to learn from such a Talmid Chacham, when a Jew cleaves inspiration and helps out such a Talmid Chacham, then Ma'ila Lav HaKosav Kilu Nidbak B'Shechina Mamash. This was Moshe Rabbeinu's question, verse Ha'elef. And Hashem showed him, Asavavim La'amudim, that even these souls, additional to the 600,000 souls, that Moshe could not find their place in Torah, Hashem assured them, Asavavim La'amudim, they remain connected to the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation. They're connected to the Tzaddik Hadar. They're connected to the Amudei Olam, to the Roshei Alpha Yisrael. They remain connected, Asavavim La'amudim. There is a connection between a Rebbe, between a Tzaddik and every Jewish soul. Smach Zvulun b'tzeisecha v'Yisachar ba'elecha. Zvulun becomes part of helping Yisachar study. It's just every soul has its own mission. Some souls, the connection to Torah is through their total revealed involvement in Torah. They learn Torah, they're submerged in Torah during the day and during the night. Some souls, their relationship to Torah is by supporting Torah, by making sure other people learn Torah, by helping other people learn Torah. And some souls remain connected to the Vavim La'amudim, They are hooks on the amudim. The neshama klalis that is connected to Hashem encompasses all of the souls. And since it encompasses all the souls and connects to all the souls, helps each soul find its place and its unique relationship with Hashem. Have a wonderful week and a good evening.